Yeah, this is just my intro.
これはある勇敢な戦士の物語。この物語を完成するのは君だ。By Hudson.
Star Force wasn't a big deal in the US, but it was a very big deal in Japan. It wasn't the first of its kind, but it really kind of established the genre.
The mystique of the early 8-bit spaceship shooter. What did they get right in this peculiar transitional period in the genre? And how was it lost as toward the very end of the 8-bit era, and as we transition into the 16-bit era, it became, through a sort of evolutionary pressure, more and more Baroque. This video is partly inspired by my lovely girlfriend Melissa, who's sitting just off camera. It may chime in at any time. And it's partly inspired by this other YouTuber who had a conversation with me in which he was scoffing at the quite simple and primitive Sega Master System game, Astro Warrior. And he was suggesting that the later, more Baroque, more graphically complex game in the same genre, Scramble Spirits, and the Aleste games, also known as Power Strike on the Master System. He was like, oh, no. He'd much rather play those than go back and play something so simple and so primitive as Astro Warrior. And this made me aware, this made me reflect, that for me and my girlfriend, the opposite is true. There's this brief period where there was something really exciting and enjoyable and interesting about the art form, with the footnote that we play video games for about 5 minutes at a time. We do not play video games for 5 hours at a time, so that may be a difference between me and everyone else in the audience. And we do play video games as a couple. We sit there and play it for the whole 5 minutes together. And, okay, what was it that made this innovative avant-garde period interesting and still makes it interesting for us? And what was it that was lost? Astro Warrior is primitive, but it's not ancient. Those are two different things. I was shocked to discover when I looked it up. Astro Warrior was released in Japan December of 1986. So some of you guys may not have this timeline memorized, okay? Galaga is 1981. And I think there's no doubt we can all agree the big leap forward in the genre from Space Invaders, the next great step in this saga, it's the step from Space Invaders to Galaga. And absolutely every contribution to the genre after that is ineluctably influenced by Galaga. But from 81 to December of 86, that's an ocean of time. And it's a period of time in which the genre potentially, if not actually, took on many different directions. Zaxxon. Did you know this? Zaxxon, 3D perspective arcade game from Sega, is January of 1982. Right? So you can see that's hot on the heels. That's right after Galaga in 81. Okay? But pushing the art form in a different direction, and I think we can all agree, there were just a few Zaxxon imitators. There were Zaxxon sequels. But that is not the direction the genre would move in at all. Sega, always innovating, but often failing, comes out with TACScan, 1982. Now, if you guys don't know TACScan, don't just look at the Atari 2600 game, and don't just look at the arcade game. Look at both. I could say this about Zaxxon too, actually. It's really interesting to compare the arcade game to the Atari 2600 game. These were really innovative, really bold games in this spaceship shooter genre, pushing it in a totally new direction, but it's a direction the genre would not go in. One of the biggest and most influential hits of all in this period, now forgotten, Sega's 1982 arcade game, simply titled Star Trek. Obviously, Star Trek, a huge name, a huge title. 3D perspective, vector graphics, first-person perspective, right? Decades and decades later, that is, in a sense, the direction the genre will go in, the direction the whole video game industry would go in, right? But not in 1982 and not in 1986 or 1987 either. 1983, Sega brings out Starjacker. For a lot of you in the audience, you're probably thinking, whoa, I didn't realize so many of the innovative, edgy games this time were coming out from Sega. Well, they were at that time. Maybe Sega wasn't making enough money in this genre. That's why they started putting their energy into other things. I don't think Starjacker was a big hit. But again, indicating yet another direction the genre could go into. In a sense, you can say Sega is refusing to just imitate Galaga. And by the way, it's a little known fact, Gyrus, 1983, Gyrus was consciously and intentionally an imitation of Galaga. The creator of the game has given interviews about this. It wasn't inspired by Tempest, very different game with a similar 3D perspective, but Gyrus was simply taking Galaga and reimagining it in the round. Yet another doomed attempt to shift Galaga into 3 dimensions, but along a different axis from either Gyrus or Zaxxon. Take a good long look at Exerion, also 1983. Some people love it. Probably not you. Probably not. All right, so what I'm trying to teach you here is 1981 is Galaga. None of these innovations look very much like the definitive direction that Hudson Soft would take the genre in, first on the 8-bit Famicom, and then on the 16-bit Super Famicom, and so on. None of these look like the definitive direction that Compile would take the genre in. And by the way, Compile are also the creators of the 8-bit Master System version of R-Type. R-Type, of course, being an IRAM property, the arcade game. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of innovation is going into one dead end or another. Okay, what was the next big step forward in this genre? And the sense of which direction is forward obviously is only created in analytical retrospect. My answer would be Xevious, the arcade game. And some people will tell you this came out in 1982. I looked into it, but no. In fact, Xevious hits the arcades early in 1983. So again, love it or hate it, today the original Xevious is hard to appreciate, But that there's no doubt that was the next step forward after Galaga. Now look, let's ask why? Why? The music is terrible. The graphics are terrible. The gameplay is an acquired taste. Nobody wants TaxScan to be the future. It's beautiful. TaxScan is a shifting perspective 3D game. People aren't saying, wow, I want more of that. I want Super TaxScan, TaxScan 2, TaxScan 3. TaxScan doesn't go on to become a Mario-like franchise. TaxScan Kart. TaxScan Party. Instead of Mario Party. Nobody's looking at TaxScan that way. Nobody's responding to Zaxxon or Star Trek that way. 3D perspectives in different ways. No, the next step forward from Galaga really is Xevious. And Xevious, we could list off the ways in which it's an innovation compared to Galaga, but obviously in a lot of ways it's quite a sort of conservative, careful step forward. So Xevious is in the arcade in 83. It's on the Famicom in 84. It does go on to have its own direct sequels, but apart from its sequels, it definitely in Japan, it influences absolutely everything that comes after. Maybe less influential in the United States and Europe. Okay, here's where the genre gets interesting for me personally. Star Force, the humble, somewhat amateurish game Star Force, is in arcades in 1984 and is on the Famicom, Japanese 8-bit Famicom, June 25th, 1985. What is it that Star Force got right? Now, I am not claiming Star Force influenced everything else in the genre. I am claiming that Star Force influenced everything Hudson Soft did after this point. It influenced everything SNK did. SNK later, the creators of software for the Neo Geo, and the creators of the Neo Geo itself. Okay? And I am also saying that it influenced everything Compile did. And most of the time, the actual names of the Japanese programming team can't really be known for this stuff. I would bet money that the same people, like some of the same people who were involved in programming and illustrating Star Force were involved in programming and illustrating ASO, the hilariously named Armored Scrum Object that is so similar to it. Okay? And that comes out November of 1985. What is enjoyable about so simple and crude a game? And, again, Space Invaders, Galaga, Xevious, and then we're getting into these games like Star Force, Armored Scrub Object, and then the Hudson Soft shooters that are directly responding to this and imitating it, the early Compile shooters that are very directly, very obviously imitating it. They did something right. And I would absolutely say this also about Astro Warrior for the Sega Master System, the game I was praising at the beginning, in contrast to John Hancock and his comments on the genre. These games are not entertaining because of their complexity. They're not entertaining because of their graphical richness, right? They're certainly not entertaining because of their storyline, okay? They are entertaining because they manage to make the fear of death and the sense of pressing into the unknown thrilling. They manage to make you aware of your own skill and your own daring on a moment-to-moment basis in a way that, for example, a Super Mario Brothers game does not. Okay? I am not hating on Super Mario Brothers. I'm not hating on Sonic the Hedgehog. But what is interesting about a game like Sonic the Hedgehog is probably exploring. And when you're a little kid, and when you're an adult, you look at this, you're like, yeah, okay, I realize I'm going to jump over this pit full of lava, and then next there's going to be an ice level. And whatever. As an adult, it's hard to really enjoy the thrill of exploration in Sonic the Hedgehog or Kid Chameleon or a Mario game. But when you were a kid, the sense of exploring, the sense of finding secrets, and so on and so forth. Okay? Instead, I have to say, this genre, this crude, simple, primitive genre that sprung out of the ashes of Xevious for these few years, I think it really is that just moment-to-moment survival struggle. And there are elements of the unknown. There are elements of discovery. But it's mostly that you're discovering what you can get away with, how you can anticipate the motion of a certain kind of enemy, how you can dodge a bullet. Now, again, guys, I am not telling you to drop out of university and devote 8 hours a day to this. This might be interesting and entertaining you for 5 minutes. This might be interesting and entertaining you for 15 minutes. And back in the 1980s, people were spending a lot of money on these cartridges, even a lot of money on these arcade games. And for us today, it's either free or it's $5 here and there. So I think there is a question. If I had been 10, 20 years older back in 1985, I was alive, but I was too small to be involved in this. Would I have been willing to spend hundreds of dollars on this? You adjust for inflation. No. I really doubt the thrill at that time would have been enough to interest me. I might have spent that money on books instead. I'm very much aware of the difference and similarity in price between buying a new Loeb edition in Latin and Greek and buying a new cartridge for any of these things. But today, these things are cheap. And this particular genre is not going to ruin your life the way an RPG is. That's why I recommend it. I think another comparison here is to Pac-Man and the Pac-Man derivative genre. So Pac-Man is similar to this period, like the early Hudson Soft shooters, etc., etc. And so I should just name one of them. You know, the original Star Soldier, right? So Star Soldier, 1986. And then, this rolls on Hector, 87, Starship Hector, so on. The list of Hudson games you guys can look up. The list of Compile games you can look up. But for Compile, we're definitely talking about the original Zanac AI. Zanac with a Z, not with an X, by the way. Not to be confused with, it sounds like a lot of other things. And the spiritual successor, the sequel to Zanac, is Gun-Nac. Gun-Nac, not to be confused with Gun-Deck. So I can't provide links in the description because the description would be too long. I can't provide links to all these games. I'll try, okay? Okay. Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man, like the early definitive arcade games, they have a sense of flow. They have a sense of, physics, the kinetics of rolling around this maze where you're slightly out of control, right? And they have a sense of threat to your life, that you can die at any time from these ghosts. But, of course, it is depressingly exactly the same thing again and again and again. The first time you play Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man, you are getting familiar with the ghost behavior. You're getting familiar with the laws of physics, the pacing, the speed. So you move a little bit slower when you're eating dots than when you're moving through an open passageway. Right. But beyond that, there isn't much of a sense of thrill of pressing into the unknown. And by contrast, so Zanac AI by Compile. Wow, we are pressing into the unknown all the time, and you're afraid you're going to die all the time. Again, another masterpiece, but somewhat different way. Gun-Nac. There's a ton of thrill in it. It's just delightful. It's unexpected. It's bizarre. It's wacky, and you're afraid you're going to die all the time. There's a sense of flow. It is fast flowing, both of those games, to say the least, right? But there is way more of a role for the unknown and things that are just out of your control and you barely know what's going on and you're reacting to it than Pac-Man. Pac-Man is like a rat in a cage by contrast. With all due respect to rats in cages. In case you didn't notice, the name of the channel is Veganvania. Smash all cages everywhere. Blah, blah, blah. All right. So I'm just pointing out, there is an ocean of time in terms of the development of hardware and software between Galaga in 1981 and Astro Warrior in December of 1986. And I feel like this period, this early spaceship shooter avant-garde that I appreciate so much. Shout out to Dino Ricky. The title is even more charming in Japanese and Chinese. I just note. By the way, shout out to Dino Ricky. One of the hardest games I have ever played. I've never completed level 1. So this is also from Hudson. This is also from the same period. We're talking about a period of time in which there was a lot of innovation. There were a lot of new ideas, but the winner, the state of the art, the avant-garde, the leading edge, turned out to be the most conservative direction that rejected all of the innovative new ideas, and the innovative new ideas turned out to be dead ends.
Dun, 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 dun.